Hey there guys, TC Made with TC Gaming. We're continuing on with our UE5 RPG series. This brings us into episode number 4. We're going to talk in this video a little bit about data tables and some structures and also sources for how we're going to build this game. I had mentioned in a previous video that sometimes it's good to just pick an existing system and try and model that, because it'll give you a really nice roadmap to be able to get your things up and running and then compare and see how they work. So for our roadmap, what I'm going to do in here is refer to a site called roll20.net, and they have some things in here that we can use to help get our framework built, just as a starting point. But it talks a little bit in here about ability scores. We had mentioned the other night about how we can bring these in and create structures for these to measure our different attributes. And just real quick, I want to mention too that, in here I have health, or in an older D&D version we would have called these hit points. This is how much physical damage your character can take before they actually would drop to 0 and either go unconscious and die or have to be revived to get back in the game. And that typically falls underneath the Constitution attribute. So even though health itself may not specifically be an attribute, I'm lumping it in there with that for now. We may break that out and put it someplace else if it makes sense later. But the other thing I wanted to do in here is talk a little bit about these data tables and things that we can use to add into the game to make life a little bit easier for us. So in these older systems like D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, if you're not familiar with D&D, what we would have done is we would have had ability scores and modifiers. So each of your attributes would have a score, like a strength would have some number that you would roll on a series of die or dice, and you would get to pick which of those numbers you wanted to keep and apply them to your different stats and build your character, which is very typical of any RPG that we play today. Only back then we did it with pen and paper, and we did it with rolling dice on a game mat. So, for example, if you had, one of the examples in here would be a Constitution score, right? And Constitution measures the endurance of your character, like how healthy you are in general. Typically, Constitutions would be higher on characters like barbarians and fighters and things like that, whereas, wizards or spellcasters would lean more towards the intelligence side of the thing. They would end up being a little bit more frail because they've given up their cap of hit points, or their cap of ability scores rather, in different ways. So normally something that requires a lot of spell casting is going to require intelligence. Clerics used wisdom. Different characters like illusionists and stuff might use charisma, stuff like that. So you would assign points to these. Well, once you've assigned points to them, the level of your score, as you gain points over time, you can adjust these, and these will create what are called modifiers. And these modifiers, in the other video I called them buffs, like a buff or a debuff, because it would be a temporary gain or loss of things. But I'm going to change the name of that to modifier. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a data table out of these values, and we're going to bring that in. So later on we'd be able to say, hey, if I have a score of 16 in my charisma, then I'm going to get +3 bonus to my hit points per level, for example, which you can see here. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in this series, in this video. And then we're also going to talk maybe just a little bit about gameplay tags and what we would use those for. And then in another video, we'll talk about actually building a gameplay tag system that is going to be borrowed pretty heavily from Leaf Branch Games. Leaf Branch Games did a video on this not too long ago, and it's really good. It demystifies a lot of the stuff that may have been picked up in the previous Tom Lumen videos that they did talking about gameplay tags, or any of the stuff that came out from Epic prior to that, where you might be lost a little bit about it. Now, for those of you who know me from previous videos know that I'm also a big fan of the Ascent Combat Framework. I'm going to be doing a series about that in the future. But Ascent Combat Framework also heavily uses the tagging system, so we will definitely be talking about that in an upcoming episode. Okay, so first things first, let's get into the project file. And what we want to do is, I mentioned, if we go back to our character here for Greystone, we had put this attributes thing on here, and I want to change the name of this value that's in here to modifier. So to do this, we got to go all the way back down the path of where we had started with this. Remember, we had built a structure for that. So if we go into our RPG content directory, that was put on the AC attributes, right? So we had all these that we loaded on here, and then from AC attributes, we would have gone all the way back to the structure. So if we go to the structure, you could just rename this to modifier. I had called it buff. We're going to leave it base value, modifier, multiplier, and max. We'll save that. When you save your change here, and you go back to AC attributes, you'll also compile this. It'll pick up the new change there. And then if you go back to the Greystone player character and you compile that there, you'll see that the new value for modifier is now shown in the attributes where you break that. The other thing, going back to this folder for RPG content, under this AC attributes, if we go back to our reference document over here that we're going to be using, we have strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And I have health, mana, strength, intelligence, dexterity when we were just randomly throwing things in there. But we might want to go ahead and put these other ones in. So we have mana was one I just put in randomly because you use that in a lot of your RPG games. That's not actually in here. But again, like I said, health is also something that's not technically a primary attribute. These are like secondary things that come off of those. So we're going to leave health and mana in there, but we want to also add in some other ones for later if we want to use those. So for example, we would go in here and say constitution we might want to add in, and wisdom. So we'll go plus over here and we'll call this constitution. And constitution is going to be based on our S_attribute structure. And then we'll make another variable here, and this one is also going to be under S attributes, and that's going to be our one for wisdom. And as I said earlier, you have different characters in your classes. We would call them classes in modern terms. But in your classes, they have different primary attributes that they use for their skills. So let's see, we've got strength, dexterity, and intelligence, and constitution, wisdom. And we just need to add in one more, which is charisma. And charisma would go in there. So just so that we have them, for what we're going to be doing later. And with that being done, now what we can do, we'll go ahead and save all. Just make sure to store all of our different things that we've changed around here. We'll go back out and look at our source doc again. And I was showing you, if you scroll down, I'm going to leave a link to this in the file or in the video description, so you'll have this. But if you scroll down a little bit underneath of all this ability scores and modifiers, it kind of explains to you what these things do. Like this says here, each ability also has a modifier derived from the score, and ranging from -5 for an ability score of 1 to +10 for a score of 30. Ability scores and modifiers table notes the ability modifiers for the range of possible ability scores from 1 to 30. So in here, what we want to do is go to something like Google Sheets or just use a regular old Excel spreadsheet. I went to Google Spreadsheets and just created one real quick. And what you can do is you can just grab this, grab these values here and just copy these. And then when you go into your spreadsheet, you just go up here and right-click and hit paste and bring that in. Now, if you're not familiar with Google Spreadsheets, there's sizers in here so you can blow up the size of the cells. I have mine down here at 50. But what I did is after I brought in this table, this table data, which you can see over here to the left, what I would do is this. I would say instead of having a 2 and a 3, have a value of -4 for your modifier. I would spread these out so you have 1, 2, 3, and you just say 2 has a -4, and 3 has a -4, and 4 has a -3, and 5 has a -3, so on and so forth. 6 and 7 are -2, all the way out to 30, which I've done here. Now, once I have these all spread out, because I don't want to have to go and say, is this a value between 4 and 5 and, or equal to 4 and less than 6 or anything like that to derive this, I just want to go look it up on the table, go, your value is 11, you get a 0 modifier. So we're going to go ahead and delete this section. Actually, I'll just delete both of these columns. So I can say delete column. Could have easily done that to both of those. And then what we want to do here is right-click on this, and we'll just say insert one row above, and this will be for our name. So this is going to be our base value, just like we have in the other one, and this will be called our modifier. All right. Now, in this Google spreadsheet thing, what we can do is we can do File, and we should be able to say Download, and download this as a comma separated value. We have different versions here we can do, but CSV is going to be the one that you most likely will want, and I'll show you why. If we go back into our RPG content folder, we can create a data table in here. Now, data table falls under the I think it's under miscellaneous. Yeah, miscellaneous data table. But when you go to click on a data table requires a structure that you can start with, and we don't have a structure for that yet. So we want to first create a structure to hold the way that we want to store these values. So we're going to go in here and say this structure is going to be, we can go up here into under the blueprints. We want to create the structure. And this is going to be S underscore, so S for structure, underscore, and we'll call this modifiers. S underscore modifiers, or yeah, that's fine. We'll just call it that for now. And in our modifiers, we can go in here and we can put in these different things. So again, the first one in our modifier was going to be called a base value. And we're going to say in here, these are going to be integers because we don't have any partial numbers on here. So we'll change this type to integer. And then we'll add another variable. And this variable is going to be called modifier. And that modifier there is also going to be an integer. And we'll save this. So now we have a structure for our data table. So we'll right click in here. And we're going to say under miscellaneous, we want a data table, and we want to base our data table on the structure of modifiers, and hit OK. And we're going to call this our modifiers. And you can call this, if you want to, T underscore modifier for table. Some people call them TBL. We'll call it TBL underscore modifier. Actually, in here, this, to be more specific, most people probably actually call this DT for data table, because I'm thinking TBL like in a Microsoft SQL or something, you might call it a TBL. But in here it's probably mostly referred to as DT. So this is going to be our DT modifier table. If I open this up, I now have a base value and a modifier listed for our values in here. And if I were to add a row in, our new row, the base value in here would be, would be 1, and our modifier would be -5, or whatever. So when we put this in, these row names, unfortunately, end up being called new row, new row, new row. But that's okay. We can just go and say, go into this data table and go into the base value column, and then look for the modifier. Now, if you wanted to, you could go in here and call this new row, and I think you can rename these in here by double clicking. You could just call that new row 1. You can go back and do this as you go in, new row 2. I mean, it's only if you want to clean this up. But what I was saying is you could bring these in by actually bringing in a data table. So I'm going to remove these values from here and hit save. And if you go into the data table details, there's a source file. So this is no source path set. You can bring this in, or you can also hit this button that says re-import. And for the re-import, you can bring that in from something you've downloaded. So what I want to try here is going out to my spreadsheet, and I want to go and say file, and I want to say download. Oh, and hold on, I want to show you why I was saying. If you go here, see it's looking for CSVs and JSONs. Same thing here. If I go re-import, looking for CSVs and JSONs. So I want to go to this Google spreadsheet thing and just say file, download a CSV file. And I can go show in folder, and we'll call this modifiers. And I'm actually just going to cut this. And just for the sake of making it easy to find, I'll just go put it in my other downloads directory there. Now when I'm back inside of the engine, I can go in here and say re-import downloads and find that modifiers table. Expected column base value not found in input. Let's see what we got there. So it actually put them in the wrong section, base value and modifier, over in the wrong spot. So let's see if we could do something simple here, because we have our values that we want. Can we change the name of this structure? Okay, so looking at this a little closer real quick, what it did is it took our, it created a row for us here. So it actually wants 3 rows in our spreadsheet: row name, base value, and modifier. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and highlight all these. See if we can do a highlight. What, let us do a range? Probably not. Well, we'll just do a re-import. That's fine. So let's see if this works. We're going to go back to our Google spreadsheets, and then we'll just go and create, we'll do an insert 1 column to the left, and we're going to call this whatever that called it. So if we go back to DT modifier, that's called row name. So row name, base value modifier. So let's go back. Row name. Was it 1 word? That's 2. Row name. So we'll try and duplicate that. Then what we'll do is we'll just copy this value. So just highlight all those, Control C, come over here and do a Control V, and we'll do the same thing. Now we'll go File, Download, CSV, and I'll go in here and say Show in Folder. I'm going to copy this, go to my Downloads directory, and just say Paste. I'll delete this one and rename this as modifiers, just so we have an easy way to get it again. And we'll come back in here and we'll say re-import. And now you see it says successfully re-imported DT modifier. And now we have a row name 1 through 30, a base value 1 through 30, and a modifier of -5 to +10. Okay, so I go back through that a little bit. I made it a little more complex than it needed to be. I didn't realize it had this row name value that was going to bring in automatically. And then to make it even more confusing, it has the actual name that's in the space here. But again, we're going to go to this and say get base value from data table DT modifier when we go and do our stuff with this. And again, the reason we would use that is because we could return that value in our character when we're looking up different things. We'll get to that in a minute. The other thing that we want to look at here real quick to get set up for other things that we're going to do in the future is if we go into Edit, under Project Settings, you have these things here called Gameplay Tags. And under Gameplay Tags, I started laying out a section for our different attributes. So you have Charisma, Constitution, Dexterity, Intelligence, Strength, and Wisdom. And again, I have them listed here under the Attributes section. Now, what you can do with tags, gameplay tags in general, is that you can create a hierarchical structure that you can use to define different properties that can be applied to a character and can be evaluated so that you can check to see if that tag exists on a character, or to specify certain things that you want to do based on the existence of those tags. So as we had talked about a little bit in the previous video, I might have a thing where I poison a character. So I might have a thing that says like, effect.poison. And I can check and say, is that character poisoned? Is that character, do they have a tag on called effect.poison? And if they do, then, go ahead and do these things. I can also go and say, show me all the effects. So if I have an effect.poison and an effect.regen and an effect. Whatever, like vampiric drain, I could go in there and use some formulas to figure out what the net results of all those things were, and I can stack them and see which things hit the queue first, and then I can resolve them, like with a first and last out kind of scenario. But these are all things we'll get to. These, I'm kind of talking in abstract ways here, and hopefully I'm not confusing you guys and getting way ahead of myself. But to build a gameplay tag, all you do is you go in here and it says add new gameplay tag. You can roll this out, and you just type in the name of whatever you want to put in here and then add it in, and you just put periods in to separate that hierarchy. So I did attribute.charisma, attribute.constitution, attribute.dexterity, for example. If I wanted to make another one, I could just hit this little plus button, and I could call this health, and then just hit add new tag. And now that health tag will be underneath of that attribute. and we had another one that we called mana. So I could also just type in attribute.mana, but I'm going to hit here and say plus attribute.mana and just add new tag. So I'll leave this rolled out for a second. You can see the ones that I've added here so far. And again, I'm calling some of these attributes, they're not really attributes per se, but they are derivatives of things that are driving them. So if you look at my list that is on here, see if you can just match that up. Again, I'll leave this on here for a second so you can pause it and then catch your values up to this. Now again, in the gameplay tag setup, we can add all kinds of things in here. So those are our attributes, but again, I could have effects in here. I could have different things that'll be used to drive this character later on. So what we're going to do in a future video, and again from this Leaf Branch Games tutorial that I was looking at, we're going to build something to add tags and to remove tags and to stack tags and to resolve the stacks and all that kind of stuff. And it makes a really nice, elegant, and robust system because you don't have to do a bunch of things manually once you set these structures up. That's why I like ACF so much, because ACF has all that stuff already done for you. You just have to know how to use it. So hopefully this is a primer to, if you ever get something like ACF, you'll already have some understanding of how these systems and mechanics work. So I want to show you back out here also. If I go back out to my character, these gameplay tags that we're adding in here, we're going to end up building a container for those tags to bring onto the character. And then in your gameplay tags, if you type in gameplay tag, see there's things in here to add a tag, append a tag, right, to open up gameplay tag containers, get tag names. If anything has a tag, a lot of these things are already set up for you in here in this gameplay tag system. And if you want to get some more background and familiarity with it, there are some great tutorials out there. But I'm going to be building some things that leverage these types of things for you. And like when you say get tag name, it tries to find out what the name is and returns back whether it does have it or not. And we'll use that for a lot of stuff in a very, very soon. We'll use it very soon in an upcoming tutorial. That'll be the next thing that we do. So for now, let's call it a night here. Go and build yourself a spreadsheet. Get the data from this link that I'm going to leave in here for these ability scores for our primary attributes. And then we will get back together and start working through the mechanics of actually looking these things up. Like there are things called, when you do data table, if you come in here, you're going to have a thing where you can go and get, see this data table, you can say get data table row names or get data table column. And so you'll be able to go in there and get the data from that table, as I was saying before. So you'll be able to look up, hey, what is my attribute.intelligence? Take the value of my intelligence, find out what modifiers I have, and then that gives me pluses and minuses to my different roles. Going back to this system, as I said before, you have different roles that you put against each character to determine the outcomes of different battles and things. So in here, you have three main roles. You have an ability check, a saving throw, and an attack roll. And they all rely on those 6 ability scores. So you want to read up on this a little bit so you can see how we're going to do our things. But it would be something simple like if I try and swing a sword at you, that I might roll a check to see if I hit you based on my dexterity. That would give me initiative if I'm quicker than you, and then how much damage do I actually do to you? That's going to be based on my strength, and my strength will give me additional bonuses to damage. But you have an armor class, which is based on your dexterity, how quick you are, that you might be able to dodge that. Maybe you have non-weapon proficiencies that allow you to, you're a better sword fighter, so maybe you can block or parry better than most characters, and you get a chance to make a saving throw against that attack. Same thing with like somebody tries to magically poison you, and you have a character class that's resistant to poison, so you get a saving throw against that with a real high number, and if you roll your save, then you're not going to get poisoned. But that's how this is all going to work, and we're going to use tags and data tables and some very simple mathematics on here to make a robust system that you'll be able to use. So I'll put this all in the video description. Again, sorry for getting rambly. Skip through it if it's not making any sense, or go back over it or whatever, and I'll try and clarify a little bit more as we go into each one. All right. My name's TC Made with TC Gaming, and you guys have a great night. I'll see you in another video coming up real soon.